Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching us. I am so excited to invite Niti Nadarajah on the Unstoppable Me podcast today. As you might remember, this is actually a podcast and a LinkedIn Live series that I started a few months back to bring to you the stories of amazing women who are resilient, who have gone through, challenging life phases and have come through at the other end to tell this story. So the hope is really, as we near the holiday season, to inspire you and to actually give you some sort of what do you say, adrenaline boost when you hear the stories of people like Nidhi. A very warm welcome to you, Nidhi. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thanks, Shumangi. It's really good to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
It is really my pleasure. So Nidhi, you have actually gone through quite I mean, first of all, you are on a completely different continent, which is really exciting for me. And you're taking this call from Melbourne, which of course is a completely different time zone. So thank you a lot
Mm.
for making the time to do this today. I know that it is quite late for you today. So, just to give a quick introduction of Nidhi, sorry, I keep saying Nidhi, this is my mistake. Nidhi. Nidhi is a coach, freelance general counsel, and DEI advocate based in Melbourne, and she has a passion for authentic and inclusive leadership. And interestingly, she's also passionate about empowering moms to connect with their X factor to supercharge their careers whilst also having a home life they desire. A challenge and a balance that I'm so very well aware of. She also
Mm.
advocates for a range of issues, including gender and racial equity, mental health, and pregnancy loss awareness. So, Nidhi, a long list of issues there that you really stand for. I'm curious to know if you can walk us a little bit through your career trajectory, but also maybe your personal life. I'm especially interested, what led to all those issues that you feel so passionate about.
Big question to start with. Until March of this year, I was a practicing lawyer, and that had been my full-time gig for 19 years. And so it was pretty much all I did. I had, from the very beginning, a real interest in diversity, equity, inclusion issues. And so that was something, together with mental health, that I did focus on a little bit when I was in full-time employment. But over the last couple of years, something really, I guess, shifted for me, and I started to lean into what I was really passionate about. And it came about through a really odd way. Like, it was essentially through writing on LinkedIn that I started discovering all these issues that I actually was really, really passionate about and really cared about, and was getting a lot of joy and personal fulfillment and satisfaction speaking about and helping other people to speak about as well. And pregnancy loss is a perfect example of that, because I shared my story, I think, back in 2020. And it was the first time I'd really shared it. And it was quite a hard thing for me to do initially. It took me a lot of courage and a lot of sitting there going, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? To finally share that story. And when I shared it, the reaction to it was pretty amazing. And I had people, not just publicly, but also privately, reaching out to me to say, thank you so much for sharing that. That was so amazing. And, here's my story. And I feel like I can finally release some of my story. And for me, that was such a magical feeling of being able to empower other people to release from within themselves and to share their own story. And so as I started leading into that more and more, I was starting to think, well, hang on, could this be something? Could I turn this into something in the future? And it took me a lot of getting over myself and getting over the hurdles that I put in my own way, um, to actually taking that decision to, leave corporate practice or the corporate environment, and to start something of my own. And so that's been really my journey this year, and it's an evolving journey. It continues, it's something I continue to learn from every day, and I'm sure I will continue to learn from every day going forward, because it's such a big change from being in the corporate space, but so rewarding. I mean, challenging on a whole different level, but also incredibly rewarding. And I love being able to lean into all the things that I'm passionate about. And so for me at the moment, I'm very much talking about everything still, and still kind of trying to build a portfolio career of all the different things that really excite me and make me want to get up in the morning and get out of bed and do something meaningful.
Thank you for sharing that. I do remember that distinctly. I had a very close friend who also went through a pregnancy loss a couple of years back, and I remember seeing that story of yours, which I think went viral on LinkedIn, and reaching out to you, and you spoke about, I think you were just newly coming out of that and speaking about it and evolving. And isn't it extraordinary that we have a platform like that where we can share something that's going on in our mind? And I see that often when I wake up, actually I see your LinkedIn post with what's going through your mind that day. And
Yeah.
even though I have not spoken to you those many times, I feel as if I really know you, and what you're thinking, and what is sort of top of mind for you on that day. So really thanks for that gift, because you really have a very personal, and a very vulnerable way to share that. And I can tell you, for one, not easy. And, so really a lot of gratitude for doing that. So,
Thank you.
speak to me a little bit, Nidhi, about, what was your learning from, I mean, I guess you have had various challenges in your life, but what was probably the phase that you found the most challenging? And, coming out at the other end, potentially, what was your learning from it?
I think definitely the pregnancy losses for me has been one of the most challenging periods in my life. I've had a few, like everyone along the way, but I think those losses, and I think the resulting, almost the aftermath of the pregnancy losses, really changed me forever, and in a great way. At the end of the day, like, I do think there was, despite it being horrifying and awful at the time, it has really taught me about the power of vulnerability and taught me about the power of opening up. And what you were saying before about vulnerability, I never used to share, to the point that I wouldn't even share with my closest friends, my sister, my family, what was going on for me. I always had this almost like a belief that strength meant keeping things held within, and strength meant having the armor on, presenting a really strong exterior, and so I wore this mask for a very long time and really just kept everything that was going on for me, whatever it was, held deep within, which is something I'm only now in the last probably year starting to really work through with some healers and other things, of trying to release some of that deeply held, trauma and those feelings that I've had for such a long time. But when I had my pregnancy losses, I went through the same sort of mental process of going, okay, this is really hard, but I've got to present to the world as if it's not. And I've got to present to the world that nothing's going on for me. Everything's okay, nothing to see here. Get on with work, because that's what people expect of me. And so I did. I threw myself back into work. I didn't take much time off at all. And I really didn't grieve properly. And, I was suffering, like I was, really grumpy and irritable at home when I could let the armor down a little bit. But it was hard. It was really hard. I held it all within. And then about 2 months after my second loss, someone at work, I was chatting to them about something completely unrelated. And in the middle of this conversation, they said to me, "Niti, are you okay?" And I went into sort of autopilot of going, yes, I'm okay, I'm fine, almost a defensive response. And before I could get the words out, there was something within me that stopped me from going to that autopilot response. And I reflected on it for a minute and was like, actually, I'm so not okay, and I have to share where I am, because if I don't talk about this, it's gonna implode from within me. And when I shared that with her, it really changed the way I looked at holding emotion and, dealing with what was going on for me in my life. And it's part of why I do now share the way I share. It's because I've been the opposite. And being the opposite didn't help me at all. In fact, I think it probably caused a lot of, scars along the way. And now, through having opened up and through opening up more and more and through sharing what's going on for me, sometimes, even in a way that's uncomfortable for me. And don't get me wrong, I don't share everything that's going on in my life on social media. I share to the point I'm comfortable sharing, or I share to the point I'm slightly uncomfortable sharing, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, and so, but I think for me that period of time has really, really changed me. It's given me a much better understanding of the power of vulnerability, the strength in vulnerability, the power in opening up, and the importance of opening up, and also just the importance of having conversations about topics that we don't talk about all that often as a humanity, including pregnancy loss, but including various other things as well. I grew up in a Indian with an Indian background, Indian cultural background, and there are a lot of topics that are very taboo in Indian society, Indian community, even if you grow up outside of India, right? Maybe even more so to some extent. And, so even topics, anything to do with like women's health is just not something that people talk about all that often. So for me now, these are topics actually I want to discuss. I want to be open about, and it informs my parenting style as well. And, the level of openness and transparency I have with my daughter at the moment, more so than my son. He's quite young. But in time with my son as well, I want to talk to him about, all these issues too, so that he has awareness as well.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for that, Celestine. Um, it's fascinating because I think from a young age, we get some of these injunctions of what being strong really means. And
Mm.
I guess it is at a time where probably we are trying to, carve out a niche for ourselves where we want to posture and portray ourselves. I mean, especially for women leaders. And as you know, with Thrive with Mentoring, there are multiple stories that I'm privy to around that journey that women leaders need to go through, right? I mean, there is already so much bias against a feminine way to lead, and I think that sort of puts us on the back foot, and we don't want to, add to that bias. So we portray ourselves, much more aligned to. Maybe a very masculine way to lead, and clearly that takes its own toll. We are usually not very comfortable with that. I mean, there are stories galore about women adopting or adapting a style that they do not feel aligned to, and getting stressed out, burnt out, and all of those those negative impacts. So, I'm wondering, have you had a mentor that's been influential in your life? I mean, maybe it's one or two people where, they impacted your thinking. I mean, or has your journey been much more about self-discovery and doing things through your own experiments?
It's been a little bit of a mix, to be honest. I mean, I've never really been in a formal mentee mentor relationship myself. I do a lot of mentoring, but I've never had a mentor myself formally. But there are various people who, along the journey, and one in particular that probably stands out to me as a mentor and someone who really did inform my style of leadership when I entered into that sort of role, and when I was managing people in particular.
Mhm.
Someone who was very transparent, very upfront, really sort of had that attitude that you see in, say, for example, Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. That sort of attitude of, well, I'm going to look after the team, and I'm going to look after the people that I have responsibility for. you obviously need to hold up your end of the bargain, but this is how I'm going to lead. And for me, that was quite a powerful thing to see in practice. I'd had a number of leaders before that, or number of managers, let's not say leaders, number of managers before that who hadn't really led from that place. And so I'd always kind of been a little bit disillusioned about leadership and about management. And this person came along and really just was very different and just embraced leadership in a very different way. And for me, that was inspiring and really led to me becoming the leader that I became when I stepped into those roles as well. But also, the other thing I will say is that I always talk about my kids as being the best reverse mentors. You know, they're the things that kids teach you is they're pretty phenomenal, right? Like you, sometimes I watch my kids and or they say things and I'm like, wow, you have such a great understanding about things like inclusion, about kindness, about, you know, all these things that I think in some ways that we almost unlearn as we get older and then we try to relearn as we sort of pass some sort of hill or some sort of plateau or some sort of point at which we think, actually, no, those things were great. You know, I need to be kinder. I need to be more, you know, embrace my feminine energy more. I need to bring those things to the table more. And yet, these are some of the qualities that kids can naturally just bring to the table. You know, they just look at the world differently. And so I find myself often looking to my kids for some reverse mentorship as well. It's
It's
pretty
such an
amazing.
interesting perspective. You're so right. I think we educate some of these, qualities that are innate in us, and over time, I think we actually become different versions than what we were born with, and some of the times it is because of maybe misperceived understanding of what it means to be successful, what it
Mm.
to present oneself in a particular way, etc. And kids, fortunately, I have two young boys myself, are free of that. And somehow they're also free of too much. I would say there's this push to do well and succeed in the more traditional sense of the word. I think it's something that is put through the systems that we are in, isn't it? I mean,
Mm.
been unwell and away from school for a while, and I can tell you he's really happy at home. I was telling him today, I see you paying, and because he's not allowed to go to school because he's coughing, but he's doing quite okay. And I saw him playing this morning, and I told him, you really still have your maths plan to complete, and he's like, yeah, mommy, I'll do it. And then he just focuses on his gravitrax or whatever else he was making. So it's this whole idea of, being in the moment, right? It just comes so naturally. He's very free of all kinds of, to-do lists and planning and actually going on that journey and getting stressed about all of that. He's perfectly fine. Today was his eighth day away from school. So I think as parents, we were like, oh my God, another day miss, another day miss. He's doing well. He's doing fine. So, Nidhi, what are your hopes and dreams for the next phase of your life?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot of late. Obviously, with the end of the year coming up, you know, people tend to go into this sort of self-reflective phase of reflecting on the year that was and reflecting on the year that will be. And so I've been thinking about this a little bit of late. And I think for me, this year in particular, my theme word for the year has been possibility. And it's kind of been leaning into this idea of being really expansive and just really open to what the world is bringing me, right? And what's coming my way, which is really fit with, you know, me moving into entrepreneurship or solopreneurship and really embarking on this whole new journey, which is, you know, exciting and nerve-wracking and amazing all at the same time. But I think for next year, my word for the year is clarity. And I think that's what I'm really looking for next year is to really take all that expansiveness, to take all that possibility, and to start really not so much streamlining it, but just sort of massaging it into something that's a little bit clearer and a little bit, you know, more defined at the edges than it is at the moment. And so I think that's what I'm really looking forward to in this next phase. But I'm excited. I've changed my coaching niche recently through some learnings that I've had, and so I'm still working with women, but it's now in the empowerment space around being stuck in your career and really helping women to get unstuck in, if a woman, for example, like me, is saying something like, is this all there is? Or, how did I end up here? That's kind of the person I want to help now. And it's exciting as these different things start to evolve. I feel like things are becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. And so, I've got a feeling that maybe podcasts might be on the horizon, maybe a book, potentially. All these exciting things that, 2, 3 years ago, I would never have thought would ever be in my life, let alone my future. It's just, it's incredible how things have changed for me over the last couple of years. And so clarity, I think, is what I'm looking for in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you, Niti. And somebody who's going through, I love this term created by an author called Catherine May. She calls it wintering. In the Northern Hemisphere, we are going through a winter. I mean, there is snow outside as we speak. And of course, there is this pressure, to have like a sunny and, things are working and positive psychology and, affirmations and all of that drive. And Catherine May actually goes in a completely opposite direction. And she says, what? Naturally has cycles. And winter is an important cycle for all of us to go through. And there is no need to sort of, cover it up and brush it up and say that, everything is okay. But actually to own that winter in your life. And we know this invariably that, as you reflect back a few years down the line, you always find that winter in your life as rewarding, because that's where a lot of learning and growth comes from. But I'm curious to know, somebody who's going through that winter and feeling as if that winter is really not ending, somebody that is, really at a very tough phase in their life. What would be your words of wisdom or words of, experience that you'd like to share with them, especially with somebody who's not currently seeing too much light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? And I think we do try and we almost shame ourselves in some ways for having these feelings and sitting with, difficult emotions like grief or anger or failure, fear, feeling like a failure, all of these sort of things. And I think my advice to people is, one, don't try and run from it, right? Because if you try and run from it, you're just going to make it worse, because it means you haven't really dealt with it. And so either you're going to suppress it and it's just going to sit within you, or you're going to try and leave it far faster than you really need to. And you need to really embrace it, somehow talk about it. Like, I think talking about it is really one of the most powerful things we can do, whether it's to a person or whether it's in a journal. Like, I don't think it makes too much difference. I think talking to a person is very effective. But I think, if that's too scary, write in a journal. Start writing how you're feeling every day, release it, but also start leaning into the other things that are going on in your life. Because often I think what we can do is we can focus in on what's bad. When things are bad, everything's bad, and we just make ourselves feel like everything is bad in our life. But generally, if you look at your day, there might be that one little thing that you can point to go, actually, that was a really nice thing that happened today. Even if it's something as simple as, I sat down and I had a cup of coffee by myself, or I went outside onto the balcony and it was, there was a beautiful breeze and I felt really calm for 2 minutes. Whatever it is, I think finding those few moments in the day where you can point to something to say, there's something good that happened today, I think that's really helpful too. And I think journaling or talking to someone like a therapist or a counselor or whoever it is, or a friend, or family, partner, I think being able to talk about those things, I think, as well, is really, really, really helpful. And I think there's a difference, I think, often that people make between sitting with your emotions and dealing with your emotions and dwelling in your emotions, right? And I think dwelling in your emotions can become unhealthy. So if someone is really in that spot where they're just sinking into their emotions, and their emotions, that negativity is becoming everything, it's becoming all consuming, I think that's a point at which, you know, you really should be reaching out for some professional help and really talking to someone and seeking ways to deal with where you're at, right? And what is it that's holding you there? Because that's the other thing too, right? All of these negative emotions, as we call, you know, as we like to describe them, all have something positive sitting behind them. Because at the end of the day, there's something positive that's for ourselves, that's driving us feeling the way we're feeling, whether it's, you know, security or safety that's causing us to feel the way we're feeling, or whether it's a fear, you know, whether it's, you know, wanting to be comfortable, or whatever it is that's driving that emotion, there's something positive there. And I think that's the other thing to remember. You know, there's something positive there. So let's work towards identifying what that is. Talk to someone if it's really bad. If it's not quite so bad and it's just about dealing with the emotions, find a way to deal with those emotions, whether that's journaling, talking to someone, doing something that helps, you know, helps bring you life, bring you joy, you know, whether that's something like meditation, could be going for a walk, could be something completely different. You know, people find joy in all sorts of things, you know, trying to find those activities, but not forcing it either. Does that
Yeah.
resonate? Yeah.
No, definitely, definitely. I think nature is a great healer, and I'm really a fan of doing something with your body, because
Mm,
sometimes when you just focus on your mind, and then things may become bigger as
mm,
with that. So really, that whole idea of movement, doing something with your body, and doing something that takes you out of that, that mind. Mind madness, or I don't know what it is, but I do know people who have gone through like really tough situations and were unable to manage, that situation. So
mm.
thank you very much for sharing your story, and also for sharing some of these, experiments, I guess, that have worked for you. I wish you really all the very best, with your word of clarity. I love that for 2023. Yes, that's something that we can all keep returning to. Have a very nice evening, isn't it? Or good night.
Yeah.
Bye for now, Niti. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.